Two bowls of cornmeal side by side. The one on the right is coarse, flecked with gold and amber. The one on the left is fine and bone white. One of these killed 100,000 Southerners. Nobody meant for it to. A man in Illinois built a machine in 1901 that took the heart out of the corn so it would keep on a shelf in July. A real problem, really solved. The people who paid for it never got told there was a trade. And 2 years later, a soap company in Cincinnati printed a sentence about your grandmother's biscuit that I want to read you word for word. Number 23, a corporation in a free cookbook in 1913 telling Southern women that what came out of their oven was disgusting. I'm going to read you the sentence. Number 9, the one thing every grandmother in the South did to a jar of jelly that a federal center has now told you to stop doing. And they are right, and I'm going to tell you why. Number 1, what the bowl on the left could have been, and you can do it tonight with the ashes out of your own fireplace. 25 things she knew that nobody wrote down, and 4 institutions that took them. And this is not a conspiracy. Procter Gamble and Crisco, 1911. The United States Department of Agriculture and its home demonstration system, 1910. The measurement movement, Mary Lincoln in 1883 and Fannie Farmer in 1896. And the milling industry, 1901. Every one of them was fixing something real. They laid a paper standard on top of a hand standard, and the paper standard is what survived. Coming in at number 25, stone ground meal doesn't live in the pantry, it lives in the freezer. The germ carries the corn's oil and oil goes off. Wholemeal turns in weeks in a warm kitchen, and that's the whole commercial reason the germ came out. Most folks who don't like stone ground meal have only ever eaten rancid stone ground meal. And at number 24, John Beal, Decatur, Illinois, 1901, and the corn degerminator, whiter meal that kept through a southern summer and far less niacin. Here's the cost from the New Georgia Encyclopedia. From 1906 to 1940, approximately 3 million cases and 100,000 deaths were attributed to this disease. At its peak, pellagra was the 8th or 9th leading cause of death in the South, besides accidents. Now the correction. Clay, Schmeich, and Troskin at the National Bureau of Economic Research found cotton monoculture was the bigger driver. When the boll weevil ran farmers off cotton into food crops, pellagra fell even as incomes fell. The machine made it possible. Cotton made it inevitable. And the fix, when it came, was not putting the germ back. It was adding the vitamin to the white meal. They patched it. They never gave it back. At number 23, we have the one I promised you. They didn't take lard away from you. They told you it was disgusting, in print, and you believed them. Procter Gamble launched Crisco in 1911, and inside of 5 years, Americans were buying better than 60 million cans a year. The word cottonseed never appeared in the advertising. Then in 1913, the company put out a free cookbook by Marion Harris Neal under a section heading that reads, "We all eat raw fats." Here's the sentence, word for word. The shortening fat in pastry or baked foods is merely distributed throughout the dough. No chemical change occurs during the baking process. So when you eat pie or hot biscuit, in which animal lard is used, you eat raw animal lard. That is a corporation telling Southern women their grandmother's biscuit was filth. And inside a generation, the fat that made Southern baking what it was had been swapped for a product engineered in Cincinnati out of a fiber crop. I'm not telling you which one is better for you. The decision got made in an advertising department, and nobody ever mentioned to her it was a decision. Landing at number 22, render lard low and slow with a splash of water in the pot. That water is a temperature clamp because the pot can't climb past the boil while it's in there. Render it hot and you toast the solids, and that pork flavor is in the fat for good. Sitting at number 21, leaf lard and back fat are 2 different products, and she never confused them. Leaf lard comes from around the kidneys, finer crystal, almost no pork flavor, and it shears into sheets between pastry layers. Back fat is firm and carries flavor. Put that in a pie crust and your dessert tastes like breakfast. Claiming the number 20 spot, self-rising flour didn't save her a step. It made a decision for her, permanently. White Lily, out of Knoxville, 1883, calls its own flour finer in texture with lower protein content, milled from soft red winter wheat once grown primarily in the South. What the bag does is fix the leavening ratio. Before it, how much lift a dough needed was a live decision, made that morning against that morning's clabber. The bag is right on average and wrong on any given day. Number 19. The measuring cup is the most destructive object on this list, and the woman it gets blamed on didn't invent it. Fannie Farmer did not invent measuring cups. Mary Lincoln, who founded the school Farmer later attended, was writing about standardizing measurement in 1883. Farmer made level measurement authoritative, and once a recipe could be reproduced exactly, a recipe that said flour till it feels right became officially a bad recipe. The knowledge in her hands turned into knowledge that couldn't be published, and it only survives if somebody stands next to you. That brings us to number 18. The federal government came into the South and taught women to can, and the scholarship says they were glad of it. That's not the problem. The paperwork is the problem. Marie Cromer, a school teacher in Aiken County, South Carolina, started the first Girls Tomato Club around 1910, and her stated goal was that girls should not learn simply how to grow better and more perfect tomatoes, but how to grow better and more perfect women. 19 years later, North Carolina's Live at Home campaign set quotas. 57 pints of vegetables and 45 pints of fruit per person, at least 30 hens, at least one milk cow. A food supply governed by feel and by season became one governed by a number on a form, and the number is what gets handed down because the feel can't be. At number 17, she wasn't guessing at that oven, she was reading a map. A wood range has no thermostat, but it has a stable, repeatable gradient. Hottest over the firebox, coolest at the far end, warming shelf above. Moving a pot 2 inches was the same as turning a dial. It calibrated to her hand and her stove, which is why it could never be written down. Number 16 is one folks get backwards. Sorghum is not molasses, and swapping them is a leavening problem, not a flavor problem. Sorghum is boiled straight down from the juice of sweet cane. Molasses is a byproduct of refining sugarcane. Old soda recipes leaned on molasses as the acid, so swap it without adjusting, and you get a flat, soapy gingerbread. That puts us at number 15. Clabber was not spoiled milk. It was a leavening agent she made on purpose. Raw milk left to sour drops to about 4.5 on the acid scale, and the casein coagulates into a thick, tangy curd. That acid is the soda's partner, but clabber only works with raw milk. Pasteurized milk left out doesn't clabber. It putrefies. Number 14, the buttermilk crock sat out on the counter, and that was correct. Real churned buttermilk is an actively fermenting culture already at a low acidity level, and held warm, it only gets more reliable. And I'll say this flat, never do that with store-bought. Hers was raw milk with an established dominant culture, and pasteurizing took out the competitor that kept spoilage organisms down. At number 13, we have a swap nobody sent word about. The buttermilk in your icebox is not the buttermilk in her recipe. Traditional buttermilk is the thin, tangy liquid left after churning butter. Modern buttermilk is cultured, low-fat milk, deliberately inoculated, a 1920s invention. Her recipe was calibrated against an acid she made. Yours is calibrated against an acid a dairy picked out for you. Coming in at number 12, brown butter is not butter cooked longer. It's a different ingredient, and all of it is in the solids. Once the water in the butter boils off, the pan climbs past the boiling point, and those solids lard brown. Strain them out, and you've thrown away the thing you just made. And there are about 30 seconds between nutty and burnt. And at number 11, the skillet goes in the oven empty and greased until it's hot enough to hiss, and there's a number for that. Surface starch dries the instant it hits fat that hot instead of steaming, and lard browning starts at once instead of waiting on the inside to set. You get a crust that formed before the crumb did. The test is the Leidenfrost point, about 379 degrees. Flick water at the pan, and if the drops beat up and skate, instead of hissing flat, you're there. And the black on that pan is polymerized fat bonded to the iron, not grease. Undershoot, and the batter soaks in warm grease, and you've made a greasy cake with no crust. Everything down to here you could go do in your own kitchen tonight. From here on, 3 of these can genuinely hurt you, and one of them the federal government took off the table in 1960 and never gave back. If you're the kind that wants the knowing before it's gone, subscribe. Number 10, home canned, low acid vegetables. This is where I argue against my own list, and I should. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are not hedging. Home canned vegetables, which are low acid foods, are the most common cause of botulism outbreaks in the United States. And you cannot see, smell, or taste the toxin that causes botulism. Pressure canning is the only recommended method, and the Department of Agriculture settled that in 1917. Those beans she put up in a water bath that everybody ate and everybody was fine, that's survivorship. That is not a method. Some of what they took, because it was killing people. At number 9, the one I promised you in the first minute, the disc of paraffin on top of the jelly. For 100 years it worked most of the time. Melted wax over hot jelly shuts out the oxygen, and on something that sweet and that acid, that's usually enough. Every Southerner over 50 has seen that jar, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia now says this, word for word. Because of possible mold contamination, paraffin or wax seals are no longer recommended for any sweet spread, including jellies. The wax shrinks as it cools and pulls away from the glass. Mold grows in the gap, and the toxins run below what you can see. They took it away from her, and they were right to. That brings us to number 8, and I'll say this one with respect first. Grandma's tomatoes were more acidic. That's why she never added lemon juice. Everybody's grandmother canned tomatoes plain. Everybody's survived. It isn't true. Heflebauer and Washburn at Utah State tested 15 varieties for the Journal of Extension. 3 of the heirloom varieties had statistically lower acidity than the hybrid used as a standard for comparison. Wisconsin Extension tested 55 heirlooms and found 27% of them at or above 4.6 on the acid scale, which is where a tomato stops being safe to can plain. Now let me give it back to her because the flavor part is dead right. Old tomatoes did taste sharper because tartness is the ratio of acid to sugar and aroma, not the raw number. And here's what matters. The rule changed, not the tomato. She wasn't defying a rule. There wasn't one yet, and she was working without the number. Number 7, sassafras tea, and the year it was made illegal. Dug root bark in the spring, boiled down, the most harmless sounding ritual in the Southern year. The Food and Drug Administration prohibited saffrole from food in 1960, and that ended real sassafras tea and original root beer in commerce both. The National Toxicology Program later listed saffrole as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen after it produced liver cancers in both rodent species tested. What gets sold as sassafras now has the saffrole stripped out, which is why it doesn't taste like what you remember. At number 6, poke salad and the multi-boil. That is not superstition, it's a detoxification protocol. Phytolacca americana is toxic in every part, and the preparation exists because the plant will poison you otherwise. The Kentucky data published in Toxicon counted 1,669 exposures over 20 years. Median age, 3 years old. 93.9% involved the berries. No deaths in the study period, so say both halves. The cooks are not the casualties. That data is dominated by little children eating berries. Sitting at number 5, and here comes the second one I have to take away from you. Never salt the beans early, it'll make them tough. It's backwards. Beans soften when the pectin in the middle lamella breaks down. The calcium and magnesium in hard water are doubly charged, and they bridge those pectin chains into calcium pectate, which is rebar in the mortar. Sodium is singly charged. It displaces them and weakens the network. Salt makes beans soften faster. Now the rescue, because the pot that never gave up was real. It was acid. Pectin breakdown stalls as the acid climbs, so tomatoes or vinegar at the start will leave you with beans that never come tender. She was right that something in that pot was doing it. She just blamed the salt instead of the tomatoes. And that's why the pepper vinegar lives on the table and not in the pot. The pot liquor has what the water took, not everything. The beta-carotene stays in the leaf. All right, now the one everybody in America gets wrong, and we can name the man who started it. At number 4, searing seals in the juices. Say it with respect because it's in every cookbook in your mother's kitchen and has been for 170 years. It's wrong, and it has an author. Justus von Liebig proposed it in 1847. Seared meat loses as much moisture as unseared meat, sometimes more. There is no seal. There was never a seal. But the observation is correct. Seared meat is better. That's Maillard browning, hundreds of new aroma compounds at the surface. The crust is the flavor. It is not a lid. He was right that it matters. He was wrong about what it's doing. Number 3, the recipe didn't fail. The chicken changed. Any old recipe that tells you to simmer a chicken 2 hours or calls for a bird to be boiled was written for a spent laying hen. An old bird carries far more collagen than a 7-week broiler, and long moist heat turns that collagen into gelatin. That gelatin is what chicken and dumplings actually taste like. A modern broiler has almost none to convert, so an hour of simmering just wrings the bird out. Jesse Jewell built the integrated broiler industry out of Gainesville, Georgia in the 1930s. Cook a supermarket bird by her recipe and you'll blame yourself. Don't. They changed the ingredient underneath the instructions and never mentioned it. At number 2, the flour bowl that never got emptied and the well you pushed into the middle of it. In kitchens all over the South, there was a wooden or crockery bowl of flour that lived on the counter permanently. You pushed a well down into the center, poured the liquid and the fat into it, and worked outward, pulling in only as much flour as the dough would take. That's a self-correcting hydration system. Flour's moisture swings with the humidity in the room, so a fixed ratio is wrong on most days of the year. The well makes the liquid the constant and the flour the variable, and lets the dough tell you when to stop. This is the direct answer to the number 19. Fannie Farmer's cup made the ratio authoritative. The bowl made the dough authoritative. The whole skill is knowing when to stop, which is exactly what a measuring cup takes off your hands and exactly what cannot be written down. And if you moved off and there's no such bowl in the kitchen you keep now, you already know what I mean. Now, the bowl on the left. Number 1, ash hominy. Here is what that white meal was supposed to be. You soak whole dried corn in an alkaline solution made from hardwood ash. The alkali breaks down the hull and frees the corn's niacin, which in untreated corn sits locked in a bound form called niacin your body cannot get at. That is nixtamalization, and it's the reason corn-dependent civilizations went 3,000 years without pellagra. That knowledge came from indigenous cooks. And you can do it. 1 part sifted hardwood ash to 1 part corn. Boil the ash in 4 parts water for 15 minutes, let it settle and strain it off. Boil the corn in that liquid until tender in a non-reactive pot. Steep it 6 to 12 hours until the skins slip, then rinse and rub them off. And this is the 4th thing on this list that can hurt you. You are making a caustic alkali in your kitchen. Pine ash is poisonous, hardwood only. Oak, ash, hickory. Overtreat it and the corn goes slick and soapy and tastes of lye. Now here's why it's the one. This knowledge got lost twice. First with the systematic destruction of native people and native culture, then a second time here to shame. Glenn Roberts of Anson Mills says it better than I can. It was beyond poverty food. It was the cuisine of shame. And it is back right now on Southern menus and in Appalachian kitchens. A machine took it out of the corn. A vitamin pill put the vitamin back, but not the knowledge. And the knowledge was never actually lost. It was sitting in a pot in the mountains the whole time, waiting on somebody to ask. You can do this tonight with the ashes out of your own fireplace. Nobody has to give it back to you. You just have to want it. 2 more she'd have done without thinking. The grease can beside the stove wasn't thrift. It was a flavor bank, and the drippings off a pan of bacon carried salt and smoke into the next pan of cornbread for free. It worked in kitchens where that can turned over constantly. Let it sit warm for months and it goes rancid and takes every dish after it down too. And here's one you can settle tonight. Drop an egg in a glass of water. Lies flat, it's fresh. Floats, throw it out. The shell is porous, so the air cell grows and the density drops. But say it out loud with me. That measures age. It does not measure safety. Nobody in this story was a villain. The miller wanted meal that would keep till July. The soap company wanted to sell a can. The school teacher in Aiken County wanted girls to have something that was theirs. Every one of them laid a paper standard on top of a hand standard, and the paper standard is what survived. Nobody ever told you there was a trade. And some of it they took because it was killing people. The wax on the jelly, the beans in the water bath. They were right about those, and I'd rather tell you that than sell you a conspiracy. Next time, the ones where the laboratory finally caught up to her, including a ham that hangs through an entire southern summer, uncooked, unrefrigerated, cured with salt and saltpeter. So tell me something. What did your grandmother do in the kitchen that she never explained? Whose was she, what county, and what did she say when you asked her why? That last part is the one I want to read.